One of the least enjoyed bosses in old school RuneScape has finally been updated. We're going to cover exactly what's changed with Sire, as well as talk about some of the meta shifts with Sire, because it's definitely changed, and give yourself an updated guide for taking on Sire now that it's a lot more enjoyable. The first major changes with Sire has to do with the respiratory system in P1. You will now, on a successful hit, do at least 50% of your max hit as a minimum hit on those vents. On top of that, Demon Bane weapons such as Scorching Bow and Purging Staff will always hit a 50 on a successful hit. These are huge changes. The second set of changes has to do with the way Sire transitions between phases. Firstly, Sire will move between phases much quicker. And secondly, you can damage Sire during these transitions. You will only deal 50% of your damage, but this damage will add up over the fight. Your options for doing Sire are actually fairly wide. You can do a choice of either melee, range, or magic. For your melee setup, yes, I don't pronounce melee right, so get used to that. You're going to bring your best melee gear, and you're going to bring along Ember Light. It's that simple. If you don't have access to Ember Light, you can bring a Scythe or an Arc Light, but if you bring those options, you'll want to pair them with defense draining, such as Dragon Warhammer, Elder Maul, or BGS. Ember Light is great because you don't need to lower defense, so you can bring a DPS spec weapon instead. Something like Burning Claws or Dragon Claws. You'll need a switch for the vents, and range makes the most sense here. Your best option by far is to bring the Scorching Bow. It is miles ahead of everything else because you can one-shot the vents very, very easily. And to give you some perspective, you could bring a one-switch Scorching Bow and have still like an 85% chance to take out a vent in one hit. That's without using Rigor or range pots or anything. If you start bringing switches like a 4-way switch or a range pot or Rigor, you can start getting about 95% chance to one-shot the vent. So just choose what's comfortable for you in terms of switch there, but definitely consider Scorching Bow as the major upgrade. This will save you somewhere between 15 and 20 plus seconds per kill. It is that good. If you don't have a Scorching Bow, your next best option miles behind it is likely the Bofa with the crystal top and bottom. You'll be able to get 1-downs with this setup fairly consistently, especially if you're pairing it with some prayers and range pot. Both of these options are also great because they have a 10 tile range on rapid, and you're going to see how that affects P1. It is much better. If you don't have either of these options, your next best option is likely the Atlatl. It's good if you pair it with the Eclipse top and bottom, and you can camp those because they have melee strength, but your likelihood of 1-downing is going to go significantly down. You're going to do a different rotation you'll see in the example kills. Bare minimum below this, you start to get into stuff like RCB, maybe Blowpipe, Hunter Crossbow. Those could work, but you're definitely going to have to do 2-downs. Let's walk through a melee kill example where I have a Scorching Bow 1-way and a Scorching Bow 4-way switch. This is also exactly what you would do if you bring a Bofa or even a Crystal Bow. What you're going to do is you're going to stand on this tile and cast Shadow Barrage. Highly recommend you have 88 Mage for this. If you don't have Shadow Barrage and you do one of the other Shadow spells, you might not stun Sire 100% of the time. Next, you're going to move 2 tiles to the right. Now, a lot of people might wait until they hear the stun sound in Sire and the tentacles go down before attacking the vents. This is a misconception. With the 10 range weapon, you are just waiting until you hear the shadow spell hit Sire, which is multiple seconds before Sire is stunned. As soon as you hear that first Shadow Barrage, you'll be able to hit the first vent for max damage. Then you can move on to the second vent, and basically by the time you get to the second vent, that's finally when Sire is actually fully stunned. Once you take out the second vent here, you move to the vent behind it, and then lastly to the vent in the southeast. If you don't have a 10 tile range weapon, then I recommend starting on the left side and rotating in a horseshoe pattern. The reason why you want to do this instead is twofold. Firstly, you can't get that extra hit on Sire when you first hear Shadow Barrage, so you have to choose if you either want to wait till Sire is fully down, or you could instead tank a hit and get that extra hit on. The other benefit of going this way is you're using weapons that are less likely to 1-down Sire, but you will end on the last vent very likely. That will make it so you can stun Sire who's right in front of you and quickly take out the vent right beside you, whereas the other rotation you would be stuck in the back for the last vent. Once you've taken out all 4 vents, move towards the middle, but keep your range gear on. This is because we can damage Sire while he's still making his way down. So you're going to use your Scorching Bow, Bofa, whatever weapon you have, and you're going to attack him, and then move to this corner tile right after that. You should be able to get in 3 hits with the Scorching Bow or a Bofa before switching to melee. If you're using a faster weapon, you might get an extra hit in, but most of those have low range, so you won't be able to hit Sire right away. If you're using something like an RCB, then you're likely only going to do 2 hits before you switch. As you can see, this tile was very good for hitting Sire, and then it neatly pulls you to the side. If you had a defense draining weapon, you'd probably use that as 1 or 2 attacks there. At this point, you're just going to stay on the side here, and you really only have to move if he spawns acid at your feet. If he does that, move 2 tiles. Best mostly move towards the middle. If he creates any spawns, it's up to you what you want to do here. If he's close to 200 HP, you could probably just ignore it. Once Sire is 200 HP, he's going to transition towards the middle. This is where you're going to deal 50% reduced damage again, but just let your character attack him. It's going to drag you towards the middle anyways. I recommend switching to protect from range at this point because a lot of the spawns will attack you with range, and Sire is no longer going to attack you with melee. This is good up until pretty much near the end of the fight. When the spawns start to evolve near the end of the fight, you might want to switch back to melee since they tend to do more melee damage near the end of the fight. Once Sire fully roots himself in place, he's going to start taking 100% damage again, and he's going to spawn acid pools below your feet, so you'll have to move 2 tiles away. You should be able to get in 2 attacks on Sire before having to move again, but if you're using a slower weapon or you miss some ticks, you might only get 1 attack in at some points. Then you're just going to continue to hit the boss, and when he gets to below 140 HP, you're going to get teleported in front of him where he's going to attempt to explode for like 70 damage on you. All you need to do to avoid this is step back 2 tiles. At this point, if you have a DPS spec weapon, you can slap that on and get your spec ready. You can go back in Sire as soon as he's basically clickable. The benefit of this phase here is you can start spam clicking Sire as soon as you move back 2 tiles. It's not going to pull you in too early. It'll only attack Sire once the explosion attack is over, so you don't have to worry about accidentally missing your timing. Then, again, he's going to keep spamming those pools, so you have to move back and forth. There are going to be a lot of spawns at this point, so it could make clicking those tiles a little bit annoying. This is where I recommend shift clicking to click through them, to yellow click through them. So highly recommend setting that up. You might also want to consider switching to protect from melee if a lot of those spawns start to switch to their full form. If you have a spec weapon, this phase should not last very long, and I would recommend using 1 spec per kill. That should keep you going. If you bring a light bearer for whatever reason, you might be able to do 2 specs, especially with the Burning Claw. And that's how you do a Sire kill for melee. The range setup at Sire is very viable and very chill, but it does require the Scorching Bow. If you don't have that, you need to go with melee or mage. To pair spec weapons with this, there's very limited options you can use. The actual spec doesn't do anything here for the Scorching Bow, so you can't use that. Blowpipe is an option, but don't use Blowpipe on the vents. I thought with the minimum hit that I'd be healing more with the Blowpipe. You could see here, I hit the vent for 24 and I healed for nothing. This is because it's using my background actual hit, so I probably hit the vent for a 1 or a 2 and it got boosted up, so I didn't actually heal as a result. So you'll need to use the specs on Sire instead. You could use it on the transition phases and still get the full heal even though you're dealing less damage. Another option you can bring here is the Tonal Sticks of Ralos. Yes, the weapon pretty much nobody uses outside of maiden speedruns and Ulm head phase on mass groups. It has a tiny use case here. You can use it in between P1 and P2 since you're dealing less damage anyways, but you will have to put it on long range because you can't reach Sire because it's got tiny range. But it's nice to finally have a little use for this at least. And then the last type of spec weapon you could bring is something melee based. So you can bring something like a Dragon Warhammer or Elder Maul to lower his defense. Maybe bring like a 2-way switch or something, 4-way switch. The range method starts the exact same as the melee method. You're going to stun him from this tile here and then move 2 tiles to the right. And as soon as you hear that first Shadow Barrage sound, that's when you attack the first respiratory system. Don't wait until he's fully stunned. You're going to take out all 4 of them, and it's going to be very good because your accuracy is going to be like 95%. So very rarely you'll have to attack a vent more than once. And then you're going to move towards the middle and spam click the boss. The only thing you'll need to keep in mind here is you can't really move too far away from him because he'll teleport you in front of him. I tried to use this maybe as a cheese method to get through the phases, but it really slows down your kills and you can mess it up, get his full health going. You make him invulnerable kind of in between phases. It's not going to be worth it. So during this phase, again, you're just dodging pools if you need to, and you're going to get him under 200 HP. He's going to move towards the middle, and you're just going to continue to attack him and not really do anything other than switch to protect from range, which is going to be pretty good with the range setup because you're going to be moving around a little bit more. You're going to dodge the acid pools once he plants himself in place. Every 2 attacks this should be, sometimes every 1 attack if you miss some ticks or depending on your timing. At 140 HP or lower, he's going to teleport you in front of him, step back 2 tiles, and then you could just spam click and attack him and move around wherever you want. You don't have to be in front of it anymore, so you got a lot more tiles to work with. This can also help you dodge some of the melee minions so you take less damage. Finish him off this way, and you're done the kill. For the mage setup, I first want to talk about the purging staff and how it can do with these changes. Its DPS is really good. It's better than the scorching bow setup, and it rivals all of their setups while having the advantage to deal more damage in between the transition phase for P1 and P2. In terms of hitting the vents, it's exceptional. It has like 98-99% accuracy. It's better than the scorching bow on the vents. The problem with this is you need to be on the Arceus spellbook. So to stun Sire, you have to deal damage to Sire, something like 100 damage, as opposed to relying on Shadow Barrage. This is a problem, of course. Sometimes it didn't feel that bad. It was like 2 hits. But when you start to noodle, obviously it's slowing down your kills too much. The big problem with noodles, though, is when Sire spawns his little spawns out, when you try to attack with the purging staff, they're not considered demonic. This is very bad. This is a bug because once they evolve, they are demonic. So if you fail to stun Sire, you're going to have these guys spawning all around you, which is bad. If it wasn't already a bad weapon here, this bug makes it very bad. This means that our only viable option for mage is of course going to be the Shadow. For spec weapons, you have limited options here. You could bring the Eldritch Nightmare Staff if you happen to own that to get some prayer points back. Or you can bring the Accursed Scepter to lower Sire's mage defense just a little bit, giving your Shadow about 2% more accuracy. But of course, you could just bring the Shadow on its own and it'll be just fine. The Shadow is really good on the vents, of course, and you could just camp that, but I highly recommend bringing a one-way Scorching Bow switch. It's even better than the one-way Scorching Bow switch for melee. This is for a couple of reasons. Firstly, your accuracy in melee gear with a one-way Scorching Bow is a little bit lower on the vents, of course. Ancestral and whatnot's not as bad, so your accuracy on the vents with no rigor, no range pot, and just the bow is like 88%, which is very high. Secondly, one of the reasons why you might bring switches for the melee setup is during P1, P2 transition, to deal a little bit more damage, having more accuracy on your range is definitely going to be better. For mage, you're going to be shadowing for that portion anyway, so you really don't need to bring anything more than the one-way switch just for the respiratory systems. In addition, your arrows, you could bring bronze arrows and they would be just as effective. Whether you're starting with the Scorching Bow or the Shadow on long range, you will have 10 tower range again, so you're going to start on the right side here, cast your barrage, wait for the sound, and attack the vent. You're going to take out all 4 vents the exact same way you can see here. I did try to use Blood Barrage on the vents again because I thought the minimum hit might boost my healing. It doesn't do that. Once the respiratory system is down, you're going to go to the middle and attack the boss with the Shadow. Of course, if you have the Accursed Scepter, this is where you can send your spec to lower the defense of Sire. Otherwise, you're just attacking with the Shadow and you're going to protect melee as he works his way down. Stay relatively close to the boss because if you back up 2 tiles, again, it's going to teleport you towards him. It's going to slow down the kills. If he spawns an acid pool while you do this as well, you take a lot of damage from that acid pool. One thing to consider during this phase, if he does spawn a minion here, it might be a good idea to quickly take out that minion. Simply because you have way less defense, you'll take a lot of damage from minions. As the boss gets to 200 HP, it's going to move towards the middle, switch to protect from range. You don't have to move anywhere, just attack him from the tile you're on and get him down to below 140 HP. At that point, you'll get teleported in front of him. You just have to step back 2 tiles. And just like range, you have a ton of freedom where to move here in between attacks to dodge pools and to get away from the minions. One thing I do recommend with Mage, the Shadow does have a slow projectile. If you stand back far and attack Sire, your projectile takes a long time to hit. This is most applicable for the final hit on Sire. This can allow you to Blood Barrage the minions in a group so that you get a good heal right as Sire is going down. For all the methods explained in this video, there's one more thing I think is fairly important, and that's the flow between KC. As soon as Sire goes down, I recommend the first thing you do is put on your P1 gear, and then pick up your loot, and then head over to the Barrage Tile. That's probably the most effective way overall to get the flow going for these KC, and you should be able to get 40 to 45 plus KC per hour doing any of these methods. That, in my opinion, is pretty good considering that's nearly 1 unsired every 2 hours.